Let's talk about the insider threat, a threat actor that shows up constantly on the Security Plus SY0-701 exam, and one that you can identify with a single word once you understand what truly sets it apart, and that word is access. The insider threat is the one actor on the list defined first and foremost by the fact that they already have legitimate access to the organization. Lock that in right now, because it is the thread that runs through every question CompTIA will ask you about this actor. So let's define it cleanly. An insider threat is a threat that comes from inside the organization. It is a person who has been granted legitimate access to systems, data, facilities, or networks, and who uses that access in a way that harms the organization. That person could be a current employee, it could be a contractor, it could be a business partner or a vendor with access. The common factor is that they are not breaking in from the outside. They are already in because the organization put them there and gave them the keys. Now here is the single most important distinction for the exam, and it is the one CompTIA tests over and over. Insider threats are internal. Almost every other threat actor on the SY0-701 list is external. The unskilled attacker, the hacktivist, the nation-state, organized crime. Those are outsiders attacking from beyond the perimeter. The insider threat is the one actor defined by being on the inside. So whenever a scenario emphasizes that the person has legitimate access, that they already work there, that they were authorized to be in the system, your insider threat radar should fire immediately. Let me anchor this in the three attributes SY0-701 uses to compare threat actors, because the insider sits in a distinctive spot on each one. The first attribute is internal versus external. This is the defining attribute for the insider threat, and it is the only actor on the list where the answer is squarely internal. This is the attribute that identifies them. Everything else supports it. The second attribute is resources and funding. On its own, an insider may not have much funding. But here is what makes the insiders so dangerous and so important on the exam. They do not need funding or sophistication to cause enormous damage, because they already have something more valuable than either. They have access and they have knowledge. They know where the sensitive data lives. They know the systems. They may know the security controls and exactly how to slip around them. That inside knowledge is a resource no external attacker starts with. The third attribute is level of sophistication and capability. This varies. An insider can be technically unsophisticated and still devastating because legitimate access does the heavy lifting that an outsider would need real skill to achieve. A low-skilled employee copying sensitive files to a USB drive does not need to defeat a firewall. They are already past it, so do not let a low skill level steer you away from the insider threat. With this actor, access substitutes for skill. Now let's talk about motivations, because the insider threat is interesting here. There is not one single motivation. Several of the motivations CompTIA lists can drive an insider, and recognizing them helps you confirm the actor. Revenge is a classic one. A disgruntled employee who feels wronged, who was passed over or recently terminated, acting out against the organization. Financial gain is another. An insider selling data, stealing intellectual property, or committing fraud for money. Data exfiltration shows up frequently. An insider taking sensitive information out of the organization, sometimes to bring to a competitor or a new employer. And espionage can apply too, where an insider is feeding information to an outside party. So when you see revenge from someone inside, or an employee stealing data for money or for a competitor, those motivations reinforce that you are looking at an insider threat. But here's a nuance that matters a great deal on the exam, and it is one many test takers miss. Not every insider threat is malicious. CompTIA wants you to understand that insider threats come in two flavors. There is the intentional or malicious insider, the disgruntled employee, the thief, the spy, someone who deliberately sets out to cause harm. And then there is the unintentional or negligent insider, a well-meaning person who causes harm by accident. The employee who falls for a phishing email and hands over credentials. The worker who misconfigures a server and exposes data. The person who loses a laptop full of sensitive files. They had no bad intent, but the harm came from inside through someone with legitimate access, so it still counts as an insider threat. If a scenario describes an accidental exposure caused by an authorized employee's mistake, that is still an insider threat. Do not assume malice is required. Now let's do the part that wins you points, separating the insider threat from the actors it gets confused with. There are a few comparisons CompTIA leans on. The first comparison is insider threat versus an external attacker, and this is the cleanest one. The deciding factor is access and position. The insider already has legitimate access from inside. The external attacker, whether that is an unskilled attacker, a hacktivist, a nation-state, or organized crime, is coming from outside and has to gain access they were not given. So the moment a scenario tells you the person already had authorized access, that they were an employee or a contractor acting from within, you can rule out every external actor and land on insider threat. The second comparison is the trickier one, insider threat versus shadow IT. These get confused because both originate inside the organization, but they are not the same thing. Shadow IT refers to technology, hardware, software, or services used inside the organization without the knowledge or approval of the IT department. Think of an employee spinning up an unauthorized cloud service or installing software IT never vetted. The defining feature of shadow IT is unsanctioned technology and unapproved tools. An insider threat, by contrast, is about a person misusing the legitimate access they were granted. So ask yourself, is the scenario about unauthorized technology being introduced, that is, shadow IT, or is it about a trusted person abusing or mishandling their authorized access, that is, insider threat? The focus on unsanctioned tools versus misused access is what separates them. The third comparison worth noting is insider threat versus a nation-state, specifically in espionage scenarios. The two can overlap when an insider is recruited or planted by a nation-state, but for the exam, focus on where the actor sits. If the scenario centers on the person inside the organization who has and is misusing legitimate access, the answer they want is insider threat. If it centers on the external government entity directing the operation with strategic goals and resources, that is nation-state. Read carefully for which side of the line the question is pointing at. Let me give you the mental model to carry into the exam. When you read a threat actor scenario, the very first question for a possible insider is simple. Did this person already have legitimate, authorized access from inside the organization? If yes, you are almost certainly in insider threat territory, and now you just confirm with the supporting details. Are they an employee, a contractor, a partner, and is the harm coming from misuse or mishandling of that access? Access first, everything else second. And here is the specific trap I want you to watch for, because CompTIA loves it. They will describe a damaging attack and quietly note that the person who did it was an employee or had authorized access, while dressing the scenario up with technical detail that tempts you toward an external actor. The technical drama is the distractor. The detail about legitimate internal access is the signal. Whenever you spot that the actor was already inside with granted access, let that override the temptation to pick an external attacker. One more refinement to lock down. Watch for the unintentional insider, because it is the single most missed version of this actor. If a question describes an authorized employee who made an honest mistake that led to a breach or exposure, do not dismiss insider threat just because there was no malice. Negligence from inside is still an insider threat. CompTIA includes this on purpose to see whether you understand that the category is about position and access, not about intent. So let's bring it all together. The insider threat is defined by legitimate internal access. It is the one actor on the SY0-701 list that comes from inside, an employee, a contractor, or a partner who was granted access and uses it to cause harm. They do not need funding or sophistication because access and inside knowledge do the work. Their motivations span revenge, financial gain, data exfiltration, and espionage. And they come in two forms: the malicious insider, who intends harm, and the unintentional insider, who causes it by accident. To separate them from the actors they get confused with, Remember that external attackers have to break in while the insider is already inside. That shadow IT is about unsanctioned technology, while the insider is about misused access. And that the unintentional insider still counts, even without bad intent. Get those points locked in, and you will spot the insider threat every single time it appears on the SY0-701 exam. If this made the Threat Actor section click into place, subscribe so you catch the rest of the SY0-701 walkthroughs as they drop. The whole Domain 2 series is built to make these comparisons automatic by exam day.